When an object is found in strata, which geologists date to being millions of years old, do we assume the information around the object is flawed, or the geology? The way we mine coal today leaves difficulty to come across fossils or oddities. But at the beginning of the Industrial Revolution, when most of us were using it to heat our homes, stories began to emerge about the artifacts that, with what is known about our history, shouldn't be there. Could it be that our understanding of the age of this fossil fuel is wrong? Or are we wrong about us? Although the creation of coal deposits are not uniform, and theories around their development have risen, it has come down to two which are generally accepted. In situ is when organic matter collected into swamps, turned into peat, and was covered up by sediments halting the furthering of decay, where the carbon these plants obtained by the sun was trapped, and the materials squeezed by the weight of sediments between 600 and 300 million years ago. Drift theory was considered when the differences of coal properties in Gondwana were recognized. The explanation for how the coal was formed remains the same. But in addition for how the material came to collect in the area before process took place was added. So how have relics come up in ore deposits that are hundreds of millions of years old? Out of the many artifacts discovered, there are some which have enough information behind them to have us still questioning their presence. But there are others that, although carry an interesting tale, their claims either have too many holes, or the items in question have outright disappeared. A newspaper in Illinois came out with an interesting article on June 9, 1891, of a Nina Maxon Culp from Morrisonville. She came across a 10-inch segment of an 8-carat gold chain, while placing coal into her scuttle, believed to be mined in the southern part of the state. The paper reported Miss Culp thought the chain was accidentally dropped in the coal, as her husband was the town's jeweler. But that was proven wrong to her when she picked it up and part of the coal gave way, revealing the end sections remained embedded, and the rest of the chain took up space in a hollow within the ore. Although the chain was said to be about 12 grams, the reporter never mentioned seeing the item in question, and it may be well to mention that Miss Culp's husband was also the owner of the Morrisonville Times during the writing of this article. Said to have been mined 300 feet below the Earth's surface, a Colorado rancher in the 1800s happened upon an iron thimble while breaking a piece of coal to stoke the fire. The artifact was taken up as proof of the biblical account of creation, and the media dubbed it the Thimble of Eve. No evidence of this thimble remains today. As it is mentioned, the sewing implement was mishandled by its owners, the iron corroded, and nothing is left to confirm its story. A ceramic spoon was found in the coal ashes of a Pennsylvania woman's home in 1937. After being sent to the Smithsonian for analysis, it was returned broken and told she was mistaken about the item, as no such thing was possible. In 1852, an iron drill bit was discovered within a coal seam during an excavation by a building contractor. Some of the coal that was mined had been sent to heat the contractor's workshop. A James Buchanan was contacted by Mr. Lindsay, the contractor, and Buchanan then brought it to the attention of the Proceedings of the Society of Antiquaries of Scotland. The society determined that although there were no signs that the bit was from Mr. Lindsay's excavations, it was likely part of a previous excavation. Lindsay claimed there were no holes within the coal, and therefore no possibility for the bit to arrive there by accident, and that it had to be broken apart in order to free it. Buchanan is quoted in response to the Society of Antiquaries. I quite agree in the generally received geological view that the coal was formed long before man introduced upon this planet. But the puzzle is how this implement, confessedly of human hands, should have found its way into the coal seam, overlaid as the latter was by a heavy mass of diluvium and boulders. So while the item was viewed by Buchanan as an ancient artifact, the board was not swayed from their belief that the bit was modern and that a more simple explanation was warranted. In 1869, in Hammondville, Ohio, Parsons was a miner hired to blast out a seam of coal in the mountainside, and he came across a slate wall with inscriptions. On the 17th of December, 1869, the Cleveland Herald covered the story. It is said that upon the slate were embossed figures and a type of alphabetic writing. The first line bore 25 symbols. All lines were 3 inches apart, and all symbols had 3/4 of an inch between them. Crowds came to view the find, but before a more technical view could be taken of the wall, the embossings crumbled. No one thought to take a record of the characters, and without a product to draw spectators, the owner of the company ordered mining to resume. Any other information that could be attained was covered up in the process, and its exact location remains a mystery. In 1944, a young West Virginian boy was tossing coal into a furnace, when a piece broke, revealing a brass bell with an iron clapper. The oddest thing, aside to it being mined from a layer which had been dated to 300 million years, was the fact that the item wasn't native to the region. Unfortunately, upon Newton Anderson's discovery, he broke the coal to free the object and cleaned every bit off with lye and a scrub brush. Nevertheless, because of the object's uniqueness, it was still passed through some examinations. In 1963, it was taken to the University of Delaware, and 7 tests confirmed the bell was handmade. The University of Oklahoma, in 1973, conducted a nuclear activation analysis to determine the composition of the artifact which Anderson discovered. The analysis confirms 6 metals within the object. Although polygraphs have been ruled out as evidence, at the time they were highly regarded, and Anderson was more than willing to take one to quell doubt from skeptics, which he passed. The bell gained international attention throughout the years, from TV programs, authors, and religious groups. The artifact is now housed by a creationist group within their Genesis Park collection. Anderson spent much of his time researching the piece as he was growing up. Eventually, he discovered a striking similarity of the figure to that of a wind demon named Pazuzu from Babylonia's southwest. How a Mesopotamian god found its way into the Upshur County mine is anybody's guess. An owner of a mine in Hausruck, Austria, had sent some of the ore to be used at his foundry. While breaking a piece of brown coal to be thrown into one of the furnaces, a worker noticed something unusual protruding from it. Taken back at what he had found, the worker brought it to the attention of his boss, whose son Isidor Braun took it to the museum in Vöcklabruck. Theories of the object ranged from a meteor, a man-made item from a lost civilization, to pyrite. The first analysis done on the artifact was by an Adolf Gerlt, who was a professor of geology at the University of Bonn in Germany. He was the first to suggest it was a meteorite, and claimed it contained iron, carbon, and traces of nickel. An 1886 article in Nature describes the wolf's egg iron's characteristics and the strong belief which Dr. Gurlt placed in it in being a meteorite. But the author admits no quantitative analysis was conducted. In 1958 it was transferred to the Natural History Museum in Vienna, and a cast was taken before its transport from its previous home at the Landes Museum in Linz. It was examined by a Dr. Currit in 1966 from the Geological Committee in Vienna, who assessed it was nothing more than artificial cast iron. It was analyzed at the museum in 1967 using an electron beam analysis of the material. They found no traces of cobalt, nickel, or chromium, which would be needed for a meteoric claim. It may be well to mention that foundries use metals such as aluminum, bronze, brass, and cast iron for castings. But a foundry worker, as well as the foundry's owner, would not have been convinced to push an object out to the public if it was as common as this theory admits. A persisting question that also remains is how did it come to be excavated from a 60-million-year-old coal seam? Today, the original wolf's egg iron rests at the Heimathes Museum of Vöcklabruck, Austria. In Vladivostok, a maritime territory within Russia, a resident had purchased coal to heat his home, when he noticed something standing out among the pitch-black ore. Out of curiosity, he brought the item to a local biologist, who performed an X-ray diffraction analysis. Through this testing, it was found that the metal object was composed of 98% aluminum and 2% magnesium. This has led researchers to believe the metal piece was man-made. Another surprise came when the object was removed from its coal casing. The exposed part of the item looked like a plain chunk of metal, but the underside revealed what appeared to be gear teeth that were equally spaced. The majority of aluminum is mined from bauxite. The closest thing we can get to a pure form is through industrial processing, and commercially pure aluminum comes in at 99.999%. And aluminum as high quality as this gear is not found in nature. There are 4 types of coal: anthracite, bituminous, subbituminous, and lignite. They are given ranks based on quality, due to the pressure and heat imposed during the activity of their creation. The coal deposit from the mine of Caucasia in which the object was found have been dated to 300 million years. Recently, artificial lignite was created in a lab. It was discovered that what was thought to be naturally created at 750 degrees could in fact be created at 300. This opens up a debate on the current theories of what it takes coal to form. This is important because if it was generally understood that lignite formed under specific pressure and heat could instead form under a lesser force, then what about the other parts of the theory? The head of the study completed by the Argonne Institute stated that even though the work he and his team had completed, no theory of coal formation is solid, and it is all up for debate. Another analysis conducted on the gear was at the St. Petersburg Institute of Nuclear Physics, and the age and composition were confirmed. So how sure can we be that the layers of coal deemed to be 300 million years old are accurate? Since coal itself cannot be dated, Other things within the layers have to be looked at in order to determine as accurate an age as possible. Coal is too old for C14 testing. However, testing minerals formed within, or the aging of igneous dikes, which cut across into the coal, are better methods. As was discovered when a team in trying to better understand Alaska's coal reserves. By finding what can be dated above the coal seams, we are given a better grasp of the age of the material below. So how did a metal as soft as aluminum survive the onslaught of 300 million years and still maintain its shape under the harsh conditions required to create the coal it was found in? As water creates rust for iron, air creates oxidization for aluminum. In aluminum's case, it can either break it down or protect it, depending on exposure. This would indicate that the object was only exposed for a short period before oxygen was removed. But it still doesn't answer the question of how it was created. The composition of the gear have led some to suggest it could have been formed in space through collision and carried here by a meteorite. It wouldn't be the first time aluminum was found within its metallic state within a meteorite. Although it was only found once, it could be possible. But how possible? There were no other materials found with the object, other than the coal that encased it, which means in order for it to arrive at its location, all the other material that it would have passed through space in would have been clean blasted off when entering our atmosphere, every speck of it. Then the soft, pliable metal would have entered into the swamp at falling from heaven's speeds, get compacted through the process of coal formation, and remain a solid chunk when all sense tells us that it would have been squeezed and stretched like a child's cheeks when visiting relatives. It is possible that it could have been obtained from a meteorite and shaped later. But that opens up more questions as to who would be shaping the metal when no people are supposed to have been around. Although the shaping could have been caused by nature itself, we are no further ahead in understanding this oddity. So, we've arrived at the most critical of unanswered questions. Is it possible that people were around in the tens or hundreds of millions of years ago? While it's not difficult to stretch the imagination that we were doing incredible things in the tens or even hundreds of thousands of years ago, when we get into the millions, what we know about the planet itself comes into question, let alone our own lineage. The Earth has a built-in recycling center, and it's constantly churning out new from the old, whether that be in the form of earthquakes, floods, exposure to the sun and wind, fungi and bacteria, or through larger animals. Everything we are and what we create isn't indestructible. We are finding new species of animals every day that are alive. Not in our oceans, which we admit are largely unexplored, but our own turf, species that share our current time and we had no clue they existed until now. Though I'm not saying that some or even any of the items discussed in this video are proof that they are as old as they claim, there are some things which they do bring up for us to think about. How likely would it be for there to have been one species of hominid that became extinct and we haven't yet discovered them yet? What about 5 or even 10? And how likely would it be that just one of these missing species had the opportunity to evolve? Do we assume they evolved to a specific point, build a barrier? Or do we leave open the possibility that we as a current species are not as unique to the history of this planet as we think we are? I'd like to hear what you think about this in the comments below, as well as any other place or object you'd like for me to cover in a future video. I'd also like to thank all of you who subscribed and have put up with me as I learn this process that is YouTube. I'd also like to give a personal thank you to Ben from Uncharted X, who convinced me to go ahead and make the channel, even though my doubts were greater than my will, and for that I'm in debt. But before wrapping this up, I have one last thing that I'd like to say. While it's easy to forget how far we've come in just a short time, I think it's easier to forget times we're no longer a part of. And with that said, how far back does one have to reach to understand who they are? And how far back does one have to see to understand their place in the universe? We'll never know with blocked ears and closed eyes. So until next time, keep asking questions.